It started with a laser pointer. Not the kind you use to entertain a bored tabby cat, but the kind a man named Steve uses when he's charging you $300 an hour to tell you that your property line is arguably the most expensive invisible stripe in America. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, watching Steve squint at the little red dot dancing on the side of my weathered cedar fence post. Next to him stood Brenda. Brenda. If you don't have a Brenda in your life, count your blessings, knock on wood, and go buy a lottery ticket. Brenda is the kind of woman who measures her grass height with a ruler. She's the type of neighbor who knows the trash pickup schedule better than the sanitation department and will leave a sticky note on your bin if you put it out 11 minutes too early. She stood there with her arms crossed, wearing a floral blouse that looked like it had been upholstered onto her, sporting that terrifyingly smug smile that usually precedes a lawsuit. "Well?" Brenda chirped. She didn't look at me. She looked at Steve, the surveyor. Steve looked tired. Steve looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else, possibly a war zone, rather than standing between a middle-aged man in pajama pants and a woman vibrating with malicious intent. Steve cleared his throat and adjusted his hard hat, though there was no danger of falling debris unless my patience finally snapped and brought the sky down with it. "Technically," Steve said, dragging the word out like it pained him, "the post is encroaching." Brenda let out a sound that was half gasp, half orgasm. "I knew it!" she squealed, clapping her hands together. "I told you, Jack! I told you!" I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm. Fitting. "Okay, Steve," I said, keeping my voice level. "Give it to me straight. How much are we talking here? A foot? 2 feet?" Steve looked at his digital readout, then back at the fence, then back at me. He grimaced. 1 inch? 0.2. I blinked. I looked at the fence. It was a sturdy thing, built 20 years ago by the previous owner. It had weathered storms, survived my attempts at pressure washing, and held up the honeysuckle vines that smelled like summer. "Steve," I said slowly, "are you telling me we are doing this for an inch?" "An inch is property, Jack," Brenda snapped, turning on me with the ferocity of a badger cornered in a cul-de-sac. "It's the principle. You are stealing my land. You are occupying territory that belongs to the deed of my house. That is theft, plain and simple." "It's an inch, Brenda," I said, rubbing my temples. "The squirrels carry nuts across your yard that are bigger than that encroachment. Can we not just, I don't know, sign a waiver? I'll buy you a nice bottle of wine. I'll mow your lawn for a month." Brenda straightened up, clutching her pearls. She was actually wearing pearls at 8:00 a.m. on a Tuesday and gave me a look of pity. "This isn't about wine, Jack. It's about boundaries. If I let you take an inch today, tomorrow you'll take a yard. Next week you'll be building a guest house in my gazebo. No, I want it gone. I want my land back." Steve packed up his laser. He handed me a bill that made my eyes water and handed Brenda a certified plot map. She held it like it was the Declaration of Independence. "You have until the end of the month to rectify the structure," she said, her voice dropping to that icy, polite tone that is infinitely worse than screaming. "Or I will have to involve the association. And the lawyers. Have a blessed day, Jack." She turned and marched back toward her house, her heels clicking on the pavement like a countdown clock. I stood there, staring at the fence post. 1 inch. 1 measly, insignificant inch. I didn't know it then, but that inch was about to become the most famous piece of real estate in the county. The first week was the denial phase. I figured she was bluffing. Surely no human being with a pulse and a soul would actually sue over an inch of dirt that was currently occupied by a piece of wood and some moss. I went about my life. I went to work, I came home, I grilled burgers. I waved at Brenda when I saw her. She didn't wave back. She just stared at the fence, taking notes on a clipboard. Then the letter came. You know the kind. Certified mail, thick envelope, heavy paper stock that screams, "I cost $6 to mail because I contain bad news." I signed for it, feeling a pit form in my stomach. I ripped it open right there in the driveway. Notice of violation and demand to cure. It was from the law offices of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Okay, not really, but close enough. It was a formal demand letter stating that my unauthorized structure was illegally encroaching on the property of Mrs. Brenda Higgins and that I was in violation of City Ordinance 44B and HOA Bylaw Section 9, Paragraph C. Failure to remove or relocate the encroaching structure within 30 days will result in legal action, seeking damages, legal fees, and a daily fine of $500 until the encroachment is rectified. $500 a day. I walked inside and slapped the letter on the kitchen island. My blood was boiling. It wasn't the money, well, it was the money, but it was the sheer pettiness of it. I looked out the kitchen window. I could see the fence. It looked innocent. It was just wood. It wasn't attacking anyone. I needed a professional. I called Mike. Big Mike is a contractor who has done work on my house before. He's about 6'4", built like a vending machine, and has a beard that could hide a small family of badgers. He hates two things in this world: cheap drywall and homeowners associations. Mike showed up the next day, chewing on a toothpick. He walked the line, looked at the survey markers Brenda had aggressively spray-painted in neon, orange, and kicked the fence post. "Solid post," Mike grunted. "Concrete footing, probably 3 feet deep." "Can we just nudge it?" I asked, making a shoving motion with my hands. "Just scoot it over an inch?" Mike looked at me like I had just suggested we try to push a skyscraper. "Jack, it's a fence. It's cemented into the earth. To move it an inch, I have to dig up the entire footing, break the concrete, re-dig the hole 3 inches to the left, pour new concrete, and set a new post. And I have to do that for every single post along this 60-foot line because the panels are fixed width. You can't just move one. You have to move the whole line." "So, what are we talking?" Mike pulled out a beat-up notebook and scribbled some numbers. He tapped his pencil on the paper. "Demolition of the old footings, hauling the debris, new materials, because you can't reuse the old posts once we pry them out. Labor, permits. You're looking at $6 grand, maybe $7. $7,000? I choked. "To move a fence 1 inch? The dirt doesn't care how far you move it, Jack. The work is the same." Mike tore the page out and handed it to me. "And knowing Brenda, and I do know Brenda, I did her patio in '09, and she measured the grout lines with calipers. She's gonna watch us like a hawk. If we're off by a millimeter, she'll make us redo it. So I have to bid high for the Brenda tax." I stared at the number. $7,000. That was my vacation fund. That was my fix the transmission on the truck fund. That was a lot of money to satisfy the ego of a woman who thought live, laugh, love signs were high art. "I'm not paying it," I said. Mike shrugged. "Then she sues you. She wins. You pay the $7 grand plus her lawyer fees, which will probably be another 10. There has to be another way." "Well," Mike scratched his beard, "the letter says you have to remove or relocate the encroaching structure. It doesn't say you have to have a fence." I paused. My brain, usually reserved for remembering sports stats and movie quotes, suddenly kicked into overdrive. "Say that again?" "It says remove or relocate. You could just take it down. No fence. Just open air." I looked at Brenda's house. I looked at her pristine, manicured lawn. I looked at her prize-winning rose bushes, which were currently shielded from the street, and from my view, by my fence. "If I take the fence down," I said slowly, a smile creeping across my face, "then there's nothing separating my yard from hers." "Nope," Mike said, "just the property line." "And if there's no fence," I continued, the gears turning faster now, grinding sparks, "then my backyard isn't really a backyard anymore. It's just yard. It's visually open." "Legally, yeah," Mike said. "Why? You want to look at Brenda sunbathing?" "Gato." "No," I shuddered. "But Mike, tell me about the zoning here. We're residential, right?" "R1 residential," Mike nodded. "And what are the rules on guests?" Mike frowned. "Guests? Like people coming over?" "Yeah. Is there a limit on how many people I can have in my yard?" "Not really. As long as you aren't charging admission and you aren't breaking noise ordinances, it's your property. You can have a party." "And what about dogs?" Mike stopped chewing his toothpick. He looked at me, a glimmer of understanding sparking in his eyes. "Jack, what are you thinking?" I turned back to the house. I need to read the city code. I need to read the HOA bylaws. I need to find out exactly what constitutes a nuisance and exactly what constitutes a gathering. But Mike, if I take that fence down, I'm not putting it back up. "You're going to leave it open?" "Oh, I'm going to do more than leave it open," I said. "I'm going to liberate it." I spent the next 3 nights surviving on caffeine and spite. I downloaded the city's 400-page municipal code. I highlighted the HOA CC&Rs until the pages looked like a rave. And I found it. The loophole. The golden ticket. Section 14.2. Fencing and barriers. Homeowners are not required to maintain perimeter fencing. Section 8.5. Private gatherings. Residents may host guests on their property at any time, provided commercial activity is not conducted. Section 9.1. Animals. Guests of residents are permitted to bring domestic pets, provided said pets are under the control of the owner. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that said I couldn't invite the entire neighborhood over. There was nothing that said I couldn't provide amenities for said guests. And there was definitely nothing that said I couldn't invite their dogs. I called Mike on Friday morning. "Do it," I said. "Do what?" "The move?" "No," I said. "The removal. I want you here Saturday morning at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. Bring the sledgehammers. Bring the truck. We are deleting the fence." "You sure, Jack? Once it's gone, everyone can see everything." "That's the point, Mike. I want mulch. I want a mountain of mulch where the grass used to be. And Mike, do you know where I can get a fire hydrant? A red one." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard Mike chuckle. It was a dark, rich sound. "I know a guy," Mike said. "See you at 7. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. The birds were singing, blissfully unaware that they were about to be drowned out by the sound of reciprocating saws and falling timber. At 6:55 a.m., Brenda's blinds twitched. She was watching. Of course she was watching. She probably had a stopwatch to make sure we didn't start a second before the noise ordinance allowed. At 7:00 a.m. on the dot, Mike's truck roared into the driveway. He didn't come alone. He brought a crew of 3 guys who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. They hopped out, armed with pry bars and sawzalls. I walked out with my coffee, giving a polite nod to Brenda's window. "Let her rip," I said. The sound of the first saw biting into the wood was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It wasn't construction. It was deconstruction. It was violent and fast. The panels came down in sheets. The posts were dug out with a mini excavator that Mike had cheerfully parked on my lawn. By 9:00 a.m., the fence was gone. The transformation was shocking. Suddenly my yard looked huge. But more importantly, Brenda's yard looked exposed. Her patio, where she sat every morning with her tea and her judgment, was now fully visible from my kitchen, my living room, and the street. Brenda came storming out around 9:15, wearing a bathrobe and a look of absolute horror. She marched up to the property line, which was now just a raw strip of dirt where the posts had been. "What are you doing?" she shrieked. "Where is the fence? You were supposed to move it." "I did move it," I said, shouting over the sound of the excavator filling in the holes. "I moved it to the dump." You can't just take it down," Brenda stammered, looking around wildly. "I have no privacy. People can see my azaleas." "It's my fence, Brenda," I said, stepping right up to the line, staying exactly 1 inch back, of course. "Or it was my fence. The letter from your lawyer said to remove the encroaching structure. It didn't say I had to replace it. I am in full compliance with your demand." But, she sputtered, her face turning a shade of red that matched the fire hydrant Mike was currently unloading from the truck. "What is that?" She pointed a trembling finger at the hydrant. Mike dropped it with a heavy thud right in the center of my yard. "That," I said, beaming, "is art. It's an installation piece." "And why are they covering your grass with mulch? Wood chips? Jack, this is going to look like a playground." "Low maintenance, Brenda. I'm tired of mowing. I'm going for a rustic, earthy look. Better for the environment." She stared at me. She stared at the hydrant. She stared at the crew spreading a thick layer of soft cedar mulch over every square inch of my backyard. She looked at her own pristine, exposed lawn, now vulnerable to the wind and the wandering eyes of the world. "You're insane," she hissed. "You are cutting off your nose to spite your face. You have no privacy either now." "I have nothing to hide, Brenda," I said, widening my smile. "Do you?" She huffed, spun on her heel, and marched back into her house, slamming the sliding glass door so hard I felt the vibration in my feet. I turned to Mike. "Is the poop bag dispenser mounted?" "Mounted and stocked," Mike said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We also put in the take a ball, leave a ball bin near the sidewalk entrance." "Perfect," I said. I pulled out my phone. It was time to market this baby. I opened Facebook. I opened the Nextdoor app, the very app Brenda used to terrorize the neighborhood with reports of suspicious teenagers who were usually just walking home from school. I typed out the post I had drafted days ago. Title: Free Private Dog Park. Open 24/7. "Hey neighbors, due to a recent property line dispute, I have decided to remove my fence entirely to ensure I am being a good neighbor. This means my yard is now open. I've noticed our neighborhood lacks a space for our furry friends to run around. Effective immediately, my backyard is open to all good boys and girls. We have fresh water, unlimited tennis balls, and a brand new fire hydrant for target practice. Come on by. The owner, me, loves dogs. No entry fee. Just bring your pups and have a good time. Please respect the property line of my neighbor Brenda. She really values her 1.2 inches. I attached a photo of the freshly mulched yard with the bright red hydrant gleaming in the sun. I hit post. I put the phone in my pocket. "Mike," I said, "you might want to stick around. I have a feeling the grand opening is going to be a hit." Mike cracked a grin. "I brought a cooler of beer. I ain't going nowhere." It took exactly 14 minutes for the first customer to arrive. It was a Honda Odyssey. It slowed down as it passed the house, then stopped. A woman leaned out the window, looking at the yard, then at her phone, then back at the yard. She pulled into the driveway. The door slid open, and 2 golden retrievers exploded out of the van like furry cannonballs. They hit the pavement, saw the mulch, saw the hydrant, and lost their collective minds. The woman walked up tentatively. "Hi? Is this real? I saw the post on next door." "It is 100% real," I said, walking over to greet her. "I'm Jack. Welcome to the park." "Oh my God," she exhaled. "The nearest dog park is 20 minutes away, and it's always muddy. This is amazing. Can I let them off leash?" "It's private property," I said. "My house, my rules. Let 'em run." She unclipped the leashes. The Goldens, Buster and Bailey, as I soon learned, took off. They did zoomies around the fire hydrant. They rolled in the fresh mulch. They barked with the pure, unadulterated joy that only dogs possess. And then, Buster saw it. He saw Brenda's ceramic garden gnome, the one she imported from Germany. It was sitting just across the invisible line, staring judgmentally into my yard. Buster trotted over. He stopped. He sniffed the air. He stood exactly on the edge of the mulch, his nose hovering inches from Brenda's grass. Brenda's back door flew open. "Get that animal away from my petunias!" she screamed. The woman, the dog, owner, jumped. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Buster, come here." No, I said, stepping in. "Don't worry, look." I pointed to Buster's feet. He was firmly on the mulch. "He's on my property, Brenda," I called out cheerfully. "He's enjoying the amenities. He's allowed to be here." "He is breathing on my flowers," Brenda shrieked. "He is a menace." "He's a golden retriever, Brenda. The only thing he's a menace to is sadness." "I'm calling the police," she yelled. "You are running an illegal business." "I'm not charging a dime," I yelled back. "It's a gathering of friends. You should come over, Brenda. Pet a dog. It might lower your blood pressure." She slammed the door again. Buster barked at the door. Good boy, Buster. By noon, there were 5 dogs. A Great Dane named Moose, a frantic Jack Russell named Sparky, and a 3-legged pit bull named Tripod, who could run faster than all of them by 3:00 p.m., word had spread. People were walking over from 3 streets away. There were 12 dogs in the yard. The noise was significant. It was a cacophony of yips, woofs, and the sound of humans chatting and laughing. It was a party. A loud, chaotic, shedding party. And because there was no fence, the sound didn't bounce around. It traveled. Specifically, it traveled directly onto Brenda's back porch, where she was attempting to host what looked like a very somber bridge club meeting. I saw her guests looking over. One of them, an older lady with blue hair, pointed at Moose the Great Dane. "Oh, look at that big one. Isn't he lovely?" I saw Brenda slam her cards down on the glass table. She marched to the edge of her patio. She didn't scream this time. She just glared. If looks could kill, I would have been vaporized on the spot. She pulled out her phone and held it to her ear, her eyes locked on mine. I raised my beer can in a toast. The war had officially begun. And I had reinforcements, about 20 of them, and they all had sharp teeth and 0 respect for property values. The flashing lights reflected off the fire hydrant like a disco ball from hell. It was Officer Miller. I knew Officer Miller because he had been to my house 2 years ago when someone stole the catalytic converter off my truck. He looked older now. His mustache was grayer, his shoulders slumped a little lower, and the look in his eyes suggested that he had joined the force to fight crime, not mediate a dispute between a woman in a floral muumuu and a man surrounded by 12 panting canines. The music of the siren cut, leaving only the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of Moose, the Great Dane's tail, hitting the side of my Weber grill. Brenda was at the officer's window before he could even put the cruiser in park. She was vibrating. If you could harness the kinetic energy of a suburban Karen sensing management, we could power the eastern seaboard. "Officer, thank God," she screeched, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Arrest him! Shut it down! Look at this chaos! It's a riot! It's an unauthorized commercial enterprise! It's a health hazard!" Officer Miller sighed. I saw it. It was a heavy sigh, the kind that starts in the toes. He opened the door and stepped out, adjusting his belt. He walked past Brenda, who was practically trying to climb him like a tree to get his attention, and stopped at the edge of my driveway. He looked at the mulch. He looked at the hydrant. He looked at Tripod, the three-legged pit bull, who was currently trying to mount a very confused poodle. "Afternoon, Jack," Miller said. "Afternoon, Officer Miller," I replied, walking over with a smile that I hoped conveyed, I am a sane, tax-paying citizen, despite the fact that I was holding a poop bag in one hand and a frisbee in the other. "Can I offer you a soda? Maybe a hot dog? I've got the grill going." "He is bribing an officer," Brenda shrieked. "Write that down! Attempted bribery!" Miller held up a hand. "Ma'am, please, I need to assess the situation." He turned back to me. "Jack, we got a call about an illegal business operating in a residential zone, and a noise complaint, and something about weaponized odors?" "No business here, officer," I said, gesturing to the crowd of dog owners who were watching with bated breath. "Just a gathering of friends, a little get-together on my private property." "Friends?" Miller raised an eyebrow. "You know all these people?" "I do now," I said. "That's Dave, that's Susan, that's, Hat Guy. We're all part of the, Neighborhood Canine Appreciation Society." "He's lying!" Brenda yelled. "I saw him posting it on Facebook. He invited strangers. Strangers, officer. In our safe community." Miller looked at Brenda. "Ma'am, inviting people over isn't a crime, unless he's charging admission." He looked at me. "You charging admission, Jack?" "Free as the air we breathe," I said. "Actually, I'm losing money. These dogs eat a lot of treats." Miller nodded slowly. He walked over to the edge of the property line, the famous, invisible line that started this whole war. He looked at Brenda's yard, then back at mine. "Where's your fence, Jack?" "Gone," I said cheerfully. "Brenda here pointed out that it was encroaching on her property by an inch. She demanded I remove the structure, so I complied. Maliciously, perhaps, but legally? Absolutely." Miller looked at the ground where the posts used to be. He looked at Brenda. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at the corner of his mustache. He knew Brenda. Everyone in the precinct knew Brenda. She was the woman who called 911 because the mailman walked across her lawn diagonally instead of using the walkway. "So," Miller said, scratching his chin, "no fence, private property, no money, changing hands." "Exactly." "What about the noise?" Brenda demanded. "Listen to them. It's a cacophony. My bridge club couldn't hear themselves bid." Miller reached into his vest and pulled out a decibel meter. He held it up. Moose let out a bark that sounded like a gunshot. The needle jumped. Miller looked at the reading. 80 decibels at the source, he noted. He walked over to Brenda's patio. "Over here. Looks like about 55. City ordinance for daytime noise violation is anything over 65 sustained for more than 15 minutes at the property line. He looked at Brenda. It's loud, ma'am, but it's legal. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But the smell, the dander. What if one of those beasts attacks me? Well, Miller said, hitching up his belt. Since there is no fence, I would advise you not to step onto Jack's property. And Jack, you need to make sure your guests stay on your side. If a dog crosses that line, we have a leash law violation. But as long as they stay in the mulch... He shrugged. It's a free country. Brenda looked like she was going to have a stroke. She turned purple. She looked from Miller to me, then let out a sound of pure frustration. A guttural ugh, and stormed back into her house. Miller turned to me. He reached down and scratched tripod behind the ears. You're walking a fine line, Jack. I'm walking a legal line, officer. Keep it that way. If I get calls about fighting, biting, or parking violations, I'm shutting you down. Also, maybe tell the Great Dane to keep it down a little. Will do. Thanks, Miller. He got back in his car. As he drove away, the gathered crowd of dog owners erupted into cheers. Someone handed me a beer. I felt like William Wallace, if William Wallace fought for the right for golden retrievers to sniff each other's butts freely. We had won the battle. But the war was far from over. The next day, Sunday, was the busiest day yet. We had a queue. Literally. There were cars lined up down the street. I had to go out and direct traffic to make sure nobody blocked Brenda's driveway. I wasn't going to give her that ammo. Around 2:00 p.m., a silver Lexus pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out. On a Sunday. In July. It was Gary, the HOA president. Gary was a man who treated the Homeowners Association volunteer position with the gravity of a Supreme Court appointment. He carried a clipboard. He always carried a clipboard. I was convinced he slept with it. He marched up the driveway, stepping gingerly over a puddle of water that a Labrador had just shaken off. Jack, Gary said, his voice dripping with disappointment. We need to talk. Gary, I shouted over the barking. Welcome to the Thunderdome. Can I get you a burger? Veggie patty? Gary didn't smile. He tapped his clipboard with a Mont Blanc pen. Jack, this is a violation of multiple bylaws. Section 4, Aesthetics. Section 8, Nuisance. Section 12, Commercial Activity. We've been over this with the cops, Gary, I said, flipping a burger. Not a business, no money, just a club. The HOA definition of commercial activity is broader than the city's, Gary said, pushing his glasses up his nose. It includes any activity that brings undue traffic or disrupts the peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. We are fining you. Go ahead, I said. How much? $50 per incident. And since this is a continuous violation, we are assessing it hourly. I laughed. I actually laughed in his face. Gary, you can't assess fines hourly. I read the bylaws. It's per day. $50 a day. Gary narrowed his eyes. Fine. $50 a day. Retroactive to yesterday. You owe us $100. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my wallet, and took out a crisp $100 bill. I slapped it onto his clipboard right over his citation sheet. There, I said. That covers me through today. I'll Venmo you for tomorrow. Now, unless you want to pet a pug, get off my mulch. Gary stared at the money. He stared at me. He realized, in that moment, that fines only work if the person cares about the money. And I didn't care. I had a savings account, I had a steady job, and I had a burning desire to see Brenda suffer. $50 a day was cheaper than therapy. "This isn't over, Jack," Gary warned, pocketing the bill. "We have lawyers." "So do I lied. "And mine is a Rottweiler." Gary left, but his visit sparked an idea. He mentioned peaceful enjoyment. He mentioned the day. What about the night? I checked the city ordinances again. Quiet hours begin at 10 o'clock p.m. That meant from sundown until 10 o'clock p.m., I was in the clear. And even after 10 o'clock p.m., as long as we were quiet. I called Mike. "Mike, I need lights." "What kind of lights?" "Stadium lights. But, tasteful, solar-powered, motion-activated. I want my yard to look like a landing strip." Mike was there on Tuesday. We installed 6 high-intensity LED floodlights on the back of my house and on poles around the perimeter of the mulch. We aimed them strictly downwards, so they didn't shine directly into Brenda's windows. That would be illegal. But the ambient glow? The reflection off the light-colored mulch? It was bright. It was noon in the Sahara, bright. I updated the Facebook page. New hours. The night shift. Work late. Dog have too much energy at 9 p.m.? Come to Jack's 24/7 park. The lights are on. Quiet hours strictly enforced after 10 p.m. Whisper mode only. That night, the shift changed. The chaotic energy of the day crowd faded, replaced by the insomniacs and the second shift workers. At 11 o'clock p.m., I sat in a lawn chair in the middle of my illuminated yard. It was silent, save for the soft patter of paws on mulch. There were 3 people there. A nurse who just got off a 12-hour shift, a writer with writer's block, and a guy who just couldn't sleep. Their dogs, an older boxer, a greyhound, and a mutt, were sniffing around silently. Brenda's bedroom window was dark, but I knew she was there. "Good boy," I whispered to the greyhound. "Who's a good boy?" the nurse whispered back. It was like a library, but with more butt sniffing. Suddenly, Brenda's bedroom light flicked on. The curtains parted. I could see her silhouette. She was looking down at us. We were breaking no laws. We were whispering. The dogs were silent. But the psychological weight of having strangers in an illuminated yard 10 feet from her bed? I waved. She closed the curtains. But the light stayed on. She couldn't sleep. She knew we were there. She knew that at any moment, a dog might bark. The anticipation was worse than the noise. Day 4, Day 5, Day 6. The routine settled in. The fines from the HOA piled up in my mailbox. I paid them with a smile. The grass on Brenda's side of the line was starting to look neglected. She was too afraid to come out and garden while an audience of dog owners watched her every move. "Hey, Brenda!" A guy named Steve, different Steve, this one owned a corgi, yelled one afternoon as Brenda tried to sneak out to water her plants. "Your petunias look thirsty!" Brenda dropped the hose and ran inside. She was cracking. I could feel it. But she hadn't surrendered yet. She needed a push. She needed a catastrophe. She needed the mud. It rained on Thursday. A torrential summer downpour. Now, usually, grass absorbs water. Mulch absorbs some water. But thousands of pounds of dog paws churning up wet mulch and dirt, that creates a substance that is less like soil and more like chocolate pudding. The park didn't close for rain. Oh no. The dogs loved the rain. By Friday morning, my backyard was a swamp. A glorious, brown, sticky swamp. Tripod, the pit bull, loved the mud. He rolled in it. He became one with the earth. And then, Filled with the zoomies, he ran. He ran in circles. He ran near the house. And then he ran along the property line. Splats of mud flew from his paws. Physics is a cruel mistress. Centrifugal force sent globs of wet, heavy mulch mud flying through the air. Brenda had just had her patio power washed. It was pristine white concrete. Tripod took a corner fast. Splat. A fist-sized glob of brown sludge landed squarely on Brenda's white patio table. Splat. Another one hit her sliding glass door. Splat. A third one landed on her ceramic gnome, covering its face like a mud mask. I watched it happen. I didn't stop it. I couldn't stop it. It was an act of God. Brenda came out. She didn't scream this time. She walked out slowly, like a zombie. She looked at the mud on her table. She looked at the mud on her door. She looked at Tripod, who was currently smiling a muddy, toothy grin at her. She looked at me. She looked defeated. Her hair was messy. She had bags under her eyes from the night shift lights. Her patio was ruined. Her privacy was gone. Her life had become a 24/7 dog show. She walked to the edge of the property line. She stopped exactly 1 inch away. "Jack," she said. Her voice was hollow. "Hey, Brenda," I said, leaning on a shovel I was using to scoop poop. "Rough weather, huh?" "I can't do this," she whispered. "Can't do what? Enjoy the community spirit?" "I can't sleep," she said. "I can't read in my garden. I can't have friends over because of the smell. And now, the mud." "Yeah, the mud is tricky," I admitted. Big Mike suggested I install a drainage system, but that would require, well, digging near the property line, and I don't want to encroach. She closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. "What will it take?" she asked. I paused. This was it, the moment of negotiation. "What do you mean?" "To close the park," she said. "What will it take to make it stop?" "Well," I said, scratching my chin, "I'd love to go back to being a private residence, Brenda. I really would. But I have a safety issue. I can't have dogs running loose without a fence. And I can't afford a fence. You know, with the demolition costs and the daily fines from the HOA, money is tight." She stared at me. She knew exactly what I was doing. She knew it was extortion. She knew it was petty. "If I pay for the fence," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "If I pay for it, will you close the park?" I looked at her. I looked at the mud. I looked at Tripod. "It has to be a nice fence, Brenda. Vinyl, 6 feet high, privacy style. None of that chain link garbage." "Fine," she grit out. "And," I added, "I need the permit fees covered. And the survey fees." "Fine. And I want the HOA fines wiped. You're friends with Gary. Make it happen." She trembled. I can talk to him. And one more thing." She looked up, fear in her eyes. "What?" "The new fence," I said softly. "It's going to be built on the original line, the one before the survey. I want my inch back." Her eyes widened. "But that's my property. The survey proved it." "I know," I said. "But if we build it on the true line, then I lose a square foot of my yard. And if I lose a square foot, I might not have enough room for the dogs to turn around. I might have to keep the park open." I let the threat hang in the air. She looked at the mud on her patio. She looked at the line of cars down the street. She looked at the open 24/7 sign. She slumped. The fight left her body. "Fine," she whispered. "Take the inch. Just Make them go away. I'll call Mike, I said. Have your checkbook ready. The closing ceremony of the Jack's Backyard Dog Park was a bittersweet affair. We held it on a Sunday evening. I bought a keg. We grilled steaks for the humans and hot dogs for the canines. I made a speech. I stood on the fire hydrant, which I was keeping, by the way. My friends, I told the assembled crowd of 30 people and 45 dogs. It has been an honor. We have laughed, we have barked, we have annoyed the HOA. But alas, all good things must come to an end. The tyranny of the open concept is over. We are returning to the era of enclosures. There were boos. But, I shouted, do not despair, because Big Mike here. I pointed to Mike, who was drinking a beer with a golden retriever on his lap, has agreed to build a new park, at the actual park down the street, with the money I saved from not building a fence. Okay, that was a lie. I wasn't paying for the city park, but it sounded good. The next morning, the crew arrived. Brenda watched from her window as they unloaded the white vinyl panels. She looked like a ghost. She wrote the check to Mike with a shaking hand. It was for $8,000. Mike winked at me as he took it. "You want me to measure that line, Jack?" Mike asked loudly. "Nah," I said, looking at Brenda. "Just eyeball it. If we encroach a little, well, that's what neighbors are for, right?" Brenda didn't say a word. She just went inside and closed the blinds. The fence went up in 2 days. It was beautiful. Stark white, pristine, and completely blocking my view of Brenda's house. The silence that followed was deafening. No barking, no chatting, no splashing mud. I stood in my backyard a week later. The mulch was still there. I decided to keep it, less mowing. The fire hydrant was still there. I walked over to the new fence. I put my hand on the vinyl. It was warm from the sun. I knew for a fact that the posts were set exactly 2 inches onto Brenda's property. Big Mike had slipped when setting the end line. I took a sip of my beer. From the other side of the fence, I heard a sound. Sneeze. "Bless you, Brenda," I shouted. There was a long pause. "Go to hell, Jack," came the muffled reply. I smiled. I walked back to my patio, sat down, and looked at my domain. I had my yard back, I had my silence back, I had a brand new fence that I didn't pay a dime for. And I had the knowledge that every time Brenda looked out her window at that white vinyl wall, she would know that she paid for it. She paid for her own prison. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA app. Violation cleared. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. It was the sound of victory. And somewhere, far off in the distance, a dog barked.